one-way garage coming at you, my way or the highway. Rebuilding the Triton 90s snowmobile trailer. The axle was looking pretty rough, so decided to tear into it. You know, I looked at new ones. Yeah, they're not cheap. I mean, they're not really expensive, but depending on what you want, I mean, they're I don't know, anywhere from $4 to $3 grand, $3 to $4 grand. And then, you know, you still got to put all your salt shields and ski guides and all that. So to me, you know, according to my employer, my labor's free. So I thought, well, I have a bunch of leftover aluminum. I know how to weld it. I got a welder, and time is free, I guess. So Triton, I think this is a 90s vintage. It's you can still buy them. They don't look like this. Triton, I think it's an XT 101. Don't quote me on that, but this is a light, and maybe I needed the heavy. You know, in the 90s, I should have got the heavy instead of the light. Yeah, that's part of the problem. But anyways, notice the axle was looking pretty rough. I mean, you know, what's that, 30 years old? You know, you can start to see the innards of the axle. It's probably time to get a new one. And you know, these torsions are pretty simple. You got the torsion arm. The torsion arm is welded to a tube, and that tube goes into a tube at, what would that be, 90? And then in between the tube and the tube are these rubber cords. A lot of tubes, I'm telling you, tube in a tube, it's just tubes. But anyways, those rubber cords run, you know, there's 4 of them in there, and that tube inside twists, and those rubber cords are what prevent them from, you know, just spinning around. But when your axle looks like that, it's probably time to get a new one. This thing was well past, one of the hubs actually came, I don't know, the bearing blew out, and the hub was right on the spindle, and the spindle had a huge scar, and I welded that up, and it was time. So I ordered a new axle from a place online, Hannah RV. They're a Triton dealer. Super easy to work with. You do it online. It's not that expensive. And, you know, in scheme of what a new trailer is, you can get the steel painted, which is cheap, just like I'm cheap. They do make a galvanized one, so it'll never rust. But for what I'm doing with this thing, I think that this will be fine. I got the bolt kit, so it comes with, everything's installed, like it literally drops on a truck. Everything's there. I checked the hubs, you know, probably after the first trip with it. I'll check see how preloaded the bearings are. But it's ready to go. I don't know about grease. I'll probably check that before I actually use it. But I got the bolt kit. So it comes with these rubbers, new hardware. Rubber is to make sure that if you got dissimilar metals like steel and aluminum, you'll actually get corrosion on the aluminum. You know, I don't know if that's considered galvanic corrosion. It actually makes the aluminum turn into a powder. Uh-oh. Anywho, so make sure you put your rubbers in there. Yeah, you gotta have them. And actually, that is one problem. After I tore the axle out, I noticed that situation, because this is where the axle bolts. You know, there's a flange on that, and that bolts there. But on the underside, when I tore the old one out, of course, that corrosion I was talking about, it like completely was starting to, it was eating away, especially where the holes were. And then where that metal part of the axle flange, it was literally eating that aluminum away. And where those it was starting to crack up again. You know, aluminum likes to crack when it gets old and fatigued. So what I did, doing the right thing and not buying a new trailer and being stubborn, you know, one way. I just went to, it used to be called Discounts Core-Mark now, and got a piece of, I think it's 2-inch aluminum iron angle, aluminum angle, and stitch that in there. So now that axle is riding on new aluminum, or sitting on, bolting to new aluminum. So hopefully that's good, but we'll see. The other thing I didn't like about what was happening with this trailer is the front, these two fronts were slowly going like this. They were just like drooping down. And in the front here, it was evident because this was starting to crack all the way, you know, obviously on the bottom, up the sides, not on the top, because, you know, it's, what's that, compression, tension? I don't know. But, you know, I was looking at this thing, scratching my head. So here's the original framing that the axle rode on. Why didn't they extend that all the way to the front and the rear? So I had some tube left over from another project. So I sistered in that from all the way to catch all of those members to hopefully help support this. And I obviously also welded in this plate, and then I did some braces to give this some rigidity. You know, there's a lot of weight when you got a, you know, Schlitzman in the corner up there and a Schlitzman in this corner. There's a lot of weight pushing on this corner, and you're going down the road and going to the UP and boom, or you're going on Lake of the Woods with your buddies and they're going 150 miles an hour. Not going to name names. I'm just saying that's not aluminum anymore. That's a whole other story. Don't have time for that. Phone's on. I got so much battery. Where was I? What was I talking about? Oh yeah. So yeah, I'd stitch in I'm adding metal. You know, if something's weak and it's bending, you just add more metal. That's all you got to do. It's not rocket science, and it's not engineering or anything. Just think about it, you know, more metal. It's, you know, more aluminum. So that's what I did. I added these because, you know, the plywood, there's no support in between. So I added those little hats just so that if you step on it, you know, it was always drooped in those sections. So that'll hopefully support those up. And then these things where the seam, you know, you got two sheets, they would screw down to this. Well, these were just like wavy, little thin, you know, flappy. So I actually put a tube under there and welded them so it's like solid. Hopefully we don't have that going on. I'm trying to think what else. Just a lot of, you know, welding. I added that tube, and like I said, I sistered it to the old frame, and then I added these little gussets to help distribute the load, because what was happening is these, because you only had one point right here that this was attached to, and you had all that weight up on these were actually cracking up, you know. So this one was pretty bad, so I put in a chunk of aluminum there. But putting this tube in there, you know, that just gives more meat for this to hang on to. And then I put these little gussets in there to help distribute the load. Of course, when I ordered that axle, they shorted me a new lug nut. So that's great. So I'm going to have like 5 shiny on one side and 4 shiny on the other side, with an old greasy, rusty one from the 90s. And of course, there's wiring issues. I mean, who, you know, might as well deal with that. So yeah, and in my fashion, you know, you take everything you own, you throw it on the ground, you get a bunch of stuff on it, you lay in it, and you roll in it, get in your eyes, and you're having a good time. Especially when it's 100 degrees out and it's still no air movement garage and the dew point's 80. Yeah, so Triton. If you're cheap like me, and I mean cheap, if you're cheap like me, and your time is free, you can do it. Rebuild the Triton from the 90s.